I want you to think about your favorite video game. Not the one that you've played the most or the one that you think is deserving of awards and praise. I'm talking about the one that you know inside and out. You're intimately familiar with the narrative structure, the story, the characters, the emotional arcs, the rise and the fall. Being so well acquainted with this game, can you tell me what it means? What message is your favorite video game trying to tell you? Video games come in a wide variety of different genres, playstyles, as well as both artistic and narrative differences. Games like Among Us, Civilization, and Rematch, for example, focus more on a well-designed gameplay style, whereas other games like Spider-Man or The Walking Dead rely more on a compelling narrative to engage the audience. Even for games that focus on story, there's the decision on how much of the game's story and world building the player needs to know in order to enjoy or connect with the game. Elden Ring, for example, has a lot of lore and world building buried off the beaten path. If the player just sticks with combat and leveling up, they might miss out on much of the actual reason they're fighting all these huge monsters in the first place, and how it relates to the game's world. Comparatively, we can look at games like The Last of Us or the Assassin's Creed franchise as examples of direct storytelling. Very little, if any, of the game's narrative messaging is hidden from the player. While, yes, additional bits and pieces of storytelling and lore crafting can be found hidden deeper in the game, the full arc of the story's meaning and messaging is laid out front and center for the player to see. Most of the time, this message is simple and easy to digest. The complexity of human relations, the importance of family and friends, the hero's journey. Further still, however, there are games with deeper meaning outside of the main story, meaning that can also be subjective based on the person interpreting it. In August of 2024, the lead developer for Fallout 1, Tim Cain, made a video addressing claims that he was paid to view or otherwise speak well on the Fallout Prime Amazon series. In the comments of this video, Tim would reply to one commenter specifically to make the claim that Fallout wasn't originally intended to have, or to express, an anti-capitalist message, making the claim that the focus was more on how conflict is an inevitable part of human nature. This claim would spark heated debate across the entirety of the Fallout community about the nature and meaning of much of the franchise's story beats revolving around big corporations, economic strife, imperialism, and how it all related to the start of the Great War that destroyed the world. When looked at altogether, Fallout's world could be read as a warning about the dangers of unfettered capitalism, whether Tim intended it to be or not. On the one hand, the original vision of a franchise creator would obviously be a big deal for any fan. Art is often very subjective and open to nuance based on the observer. However, a glimpse into the mind of the artist can oftentimes provide additional insight into the origins of the art's purpose, regardless of whether or not it was intended to be subjective. On the other hand, it is that subjective nature of art which creates a sense of agency within the viewer, allowing them to imprint their own values, beliefs, and ideals upon the creation, thus creating a stronger association with the medium. In either case, two major factors make this conversation even more complicated. The first being that Tim had previously expressed a disinterest in following up on the original game, meaning that it's difficult to make an argument one way or the other that games directly following Fallout 1 represent his original vision in the first place.
Even before there were any issues towards the end, when it turned out, hey, this is a really cool game, we should start a sequel, I was like, I don't really want to work on that. There was basically nothing about Fallout 2 that said to me, hey, you want to do this? It's really cool. I just spent 3.5 years working on Fallout. Why would I want to make Fallout 2?
The second being that the franchise has been in the hands of another development team for the past 20 years, with Bethesda often taking it from its roots into a very different narrative and creative direction, meaning that regardless of whatever Tim's original vision was, Fallout's modern-day storytelling is very clearly trying to tell a different story, though perhaps one not entirely too different.
Actually, we cut very little from our games at Bethesda, which is why the games are so irresponsibly large.
Regardless of whatever creative decisions Bethesda has decided to do with the Fallout series, seeming to lean more into exploring how capitalism in a pre-war world has shaped and influenced the post-war world, I feel as if the most important argument is overlooking that relationship between the game and the player, despite the fact that Imprinting is something that gamers very naturally do without even thinking about it. While there are plenty of games that we can look to as examples of this kind of imprinting, perhaps some of the best examples we can look to in recent history come from Rockstar Games, Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption specifically. These entries and many more usually have a pre-established character with pre-established histories, motivations, beliefs, and emotions. Through the directive of the player, we can turn the outwardly hardened criminal Arthur Morgan into a man of honor and goodness. With a few button taps, we can put a rocket launcher in the hands of a peace and redemption-seeking Niko Bellic in order to cause untold amounts of mayhem and destruction. These are conscious decisions that we as the player make in order to change the narrative behavior of the characters we play as, something that we see much more deeply expanded upon in RPG games like Baldur's Gate 3, where player choice is so well mapped out that just about any action the player might take has been accounted for, and has a result on the larger story. When it comes to the world building of Fallout, and what it has to say about capitalism, it always rests on how players and lore interpreters think about the Great War. The post-war world of Fallout had a lot going wrong all at the same time. Quickly dwindling natural resources created scarcity across the world, which led to energy shortages, which led to desperation in pretty much every country, which led to conflict, which led to destruction. While many strong theories about who ended the world and why exist, a definitive statement has never been made as to the cause of the end of the pre-war world. Kane himself explaining the original idea being that China dropped the nukes first, and many reading the dialogue in Fallout Prime as to insinuate that Vault-Tec was in fact the ones responsible. While both theories have their flaws, either party being responsible does stem from a similar core issue we've already talked about. China, having its own population to take care of, needed energy. Vault-Tec, in the same vein, had very similar problems, but is often looked at as proof positive for Fallout's more anti-capitalist messaging, especially in Fallout Prime. Originally using their vaults to conduct psychological experiments on citizens as part of a space travel study on behalf of the elitist shadow organization known as the Enclave, Vault-Tec as portrayed in Fallout Prime more so seems to genuinely be interested in post-apocalyptic survival, but specifically for them and their people. As such, it's easy to look at many of Vault-Tec's other actions seen across their marketing, business acquisitions, and brand awareness as being evidence towards a narrative about how capitalism is harmful to society at large, while mainly benefiting the interests of a select few. While this is not an incorrect way of interpreting Vault-Tec's goals and actions, it is worth pointing out that much of the pre-war strife originates from the same source, something that we've seen echoed across the Fallout series: want. In the 1843 book A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, shortly before the death of the ghost of Christmas Present, he introduces two children to Ebenezer Scrooge, a boy named Ignorance and a girl named Want, with the spirit warning Scrooge about the nature of both. Want specifically representing the constant desire for more despite one's good fortunes. In the world of Fallout, we see want manifested in a number of different ways. In Fallout 76, want manifests in the desire to expand the territory and power of a raider group known as the Cutthroats, resulting in the complete destruction of the town of Charleston, after the Cutthroats blew up the Somerville Dam on Christmas morning, flooding the entire town and killing everyone. In Fallout 4, want manifests in the form of the Institute's desire to develop a nuclear reactor to provide near infinite energy for them to continue their research, with their methods often resulting in many people disappearing, in the form of the Brotherhood of Steel's campaign against the synths, viewing them as a danger to humanity, wanting humans to reclaim the wasteland for their own. The different factions want to control New Vegas as a strategic location, the dominance of the Enclave in Fallouts 2 and 3, the want for more and more power seen across pre-war America. No matter where you look, this same pattern repeats, over and over and over and over again. Endless consumption, endless expansion, groups growing larger and larger until they inevitably clash into each other with explosive results. War never changes. When you first rise out of Vault 111, newly exposed to the blistering sunlight of the Boston Commonwealth, the very first thing you see is the neighborhood of Sanctuary off in the distance, your former home from 200 years prior. You walk the now deserted streets of the long since dilapidated homes, like a ghost wandering through an empty graveyard. It is among these memories of the past that you find something new, something recently left behind. A simple workbench. With the tools that this station provides, and the right materials, you begin the long and arduous task of rebuilding. Even amidst everything that's been lost, everyone that's been lost, there's one thing that can never be taken: the will to press on. Whether Fallout is pushing an anti-capitalist message, or an environmental one, or warning us about the risk of consumption, I think all these elements are just that. Elements. Pieces of a larger picture that Bethesda began to explore and expand upon in Fallout 4. The settlement building feature, drastically expanded upon from the player home customization options in Skyrim, serve only a minor importance to the main story, but in and of itself was given as a strange new toy for fans to play with. While there are those that don't much care for this feature, the majority of players quickly developed a fondness for this new system. So much so that it would make a return in Fallout 76, and the technology would see another massive leap forward in Starfield's Outpost system. When it comes to Fallout 76, we see a greater focus on a community-driven world building. Not community in the player-to-player sense, but rather the kind of stories that the game is telling us. Fallout 4 allowed us to build our own towns, populate them with a diverse cast of different faces, and experiment with a wide array of different items in which to build with. In 76, Bethesda not only crafted a story about peoples and community coming together to help one another, but also helped to cultivate the same mindset in its player base, resulting in one of the most welcoming and helpful in the gaming community. In the 1960s, the authors of the X-Men comic book series began to notice that more and more readers were comparing the series and its characters to many real-world activities and happenings that were ongoing in the United States, revolving around the struggles of overlooked and underserved peoples in the country. While this was not the original intention behind the story, the writers saw this as an opportunity to create an even deeper relation between the reader and their stories. After all, if the reader is concerned about real-world struggles and situations, what better way to capture their attention than by reflecting these situations in story form, and to help spread a positive message in support of these causes? Running with this idea, refining it, and fleshing out its cast and stories, the end result is perhaps one of the most popular, beloved, and well-defined narratives in modern media, often seen as the most powerful allegory against discrimination, hate, and oppression across the media landscape. Fallout 3 first came out in late 2008, immediately following up on the 2008 financial crisis, which saw home prices skyrocket, stocks plummet, and banks fall into deep instability. In the decades since, prices for everything from rent to gas to food have gone up, with wages for the average worker outpaced in magnitudes, and economic stress often cited as a major contributor to growing anxiety and distrust in governing institutions. Perhaps Tim Kaine never intended for Fallout to be read as an anti-capitalist story, but ever since the acquisition of the series, and the growing criticism of the status quo over the years since, could Bethesda not be changing their approach in what kind of stories they want to tell in order to follow in the similar footsteps that the writers of the X-Men comics did? If lots of people are struggling with a shared lived experience, is it possible that that mindset could be reflected into their interpretation of media, and in turn, result in the creators of said media changing the kinds of stories they tell in order to meet people where they're at? Like many post-apocalyptic games, the world of Fallout is no stranger to horrifying monsters, oppressive regimes, brutality, violence, and every manner of wickedness that humans are capable of. In recent years, though, I think Bethesda is more interested in telling a different kind of story, one less so focused on following the doomed story of another casualty of oblivion, and instead focused on telling the story of human triumph over all odds, even if it must be done more than once. Whether or not Fallout is pro or anti-capitalism, or if it's about the inevitability of war by way of one thing or another, there's one theme that has been front and center the entire time: finding the water chip, defeating the Enclave, providing clean drinking water, guiding the fate of the Mojave, stopping the Institute, preventing a world-ending plague. There is one thing that can never be taken, never be lost, and never be broken: the indomitable human spirit. Fallout's modern storytelling oftentimes points out unfettered want by pre-war corporations, and what sort of effect that has on the world that followed the ending, showing that not even the destruction of the entire world is capable of stopping human progress. While there will always be bad people who do bad things for selfish reasons, there will always be far more that choose to live by each other's happiness, not by their misery. Because as a wise man once said, war never changes, but men do. Through the roads they walk. And as fans of this series in particular, we know all too well that road, for it's one we've walked before and shall walk again.